Tonight's program, From Writer to Bookseller and Everything in Between, is the brainchild of David Shoulders, bookseller and events manager at Union Ave Books. Between his work at Politics and Prose in Washington, D.C., and here in Knoxville, he's been involved in more than 500 author events. He has pulled together a great panel for us tonight, and now, without further ado, David.
Thank you so much, Cindy. This is cool to be a part of this. I got to attend some of the events that the Writers Guild puts on when it was in person, and we've done some events at Union Ave, so it's really cool to have this built-in community here, the vibrant writing community that is a part of Knoxville. So really excited. Victoria I think was the first person to kind of wrangle me into this, and when she suggested we do something, I think it was over a year ago, and saying, "Oh, we need to put you on the calendar." And I was like, "Well, what am I going to talk about?" You know, so I was kind of on the lookout, and I was attending the American Booksellers Association's Winter Institute in Baltimore in January. Again, pre-COVID, what lovely times. And there was this presentation that is very similar to what you're going to see tonight, which was around Laura Lippman was the author who was being featured, and they had various people from her editorial team all the way down to a bookseller, and essentially we're talking about what is the whole process. And I was just thinking, this is what Knoxville needs. You know, I get asked all the time what I should do. Like, writers talk to me all the time about trying to get in touch with publishers, and I feel like I'm in between, because the bookseller knows so much, but we don't know everything. And you know, I'm trying to field and guide and say, oh, here's some tips, here's some tricks, but also be a part of our community, be a part of the indie bookstore world. And there's just a lot of knowledge to share. And so I thought this would be a great opportunity. People know so many bits and pieces of the publishing world. And I have my angle, I have my view, you know, I have my experience in DC, which is very different than the way it's been in Knoxville, the way it is in the South, the way it is in the East Coast. But every little bit helps sort of build the broader picture so that, you know, we are sustaining this vibrant literary community, and something that has survived through COVID. So I think it's very important. But before I introduce the real people who are going to talk about all of this mysterious process that you have either been involved with or tried to be involved with as writers, I'm going to give you sort of three, I'll call them snarky opinions, but they're my 5 years of bookselling, things that I just wish writers knew, right? And then when it comes to my part, I'll tell them more like fact-oriented. It makes it easier for us to work with you as booksellers if you know some of this stuff as authors. There's a lot of education that has to happen. I think I speak for the publishers as well, that, you know, it's truly a team effort to publish a single book. Now, the idea of self-publishing alone, you can press the button to print your book, but like to sell your book, to have your book in people's hands, to be read, to be loved, that's an entire team effort, right? And you need to know what is going on behind the scenes in order for your book to be loved in that way. But like I said, people will come to me and they'll be like, where do I start? And I was like, you got a long way to go if you're coming to a bookseller, right? I'm there when you have an ISBN, I can take care of you. But like, until you have an ISBN, I cannot, as a professional role as a bookseller, I can do nothing for you. So that's why these people are here. There are other resources. There are panels, there are books, there are other authors who may not tell you the news you want to hear, but they'll tell you maybe what you need to know to be published. The second, publishing is relationship building, right? That much I understand about the book community. There's a lot of unwritten, sort of unclear rules in our niche industry, like how do you get in, how do you make friends, how do you get an agent, how do you get an editor? But we all have to deal with those too. I have to learn the quirks of the publishing world, and I have to learn the quirks of the writing communities, just so that you'll, want to come and hang out with me as a bookseller. But also I can be your very best of friends if you let me, and making me excited about what you are doing. I will hand sell the heck out of your book. Okay. That's what I want authors to know. Booksellers should be your best friends, not just because I want to get all the perks and your love and attention, but like, I really do want to know what you're doing so that I can sell your book. Otherwise, it's just going to be lost in the thousands of books that are published a year. And if you expect to just come out of a 20-year writing cave and then all of a sudden want people to help promote your book, that's not going to happen. Right? You have to be building relationships in the market, and that means on various levels. with other writers, with publishing folks, with booksellers, people that you don't know yet are going to be helpful to you, will be very helpful to you. And then you have to follow the discourse. That's basically what I'm saying there. And then the last point I have is, we are a luxury business. As much as I have strong opinions about the role of literature and the literary community, 99% of publishing at the end of the day is saying, will it make money? Is it sustainable enough to keep our ability to do what we love afloat? All right, and the margins are tight on everyone. We're the tiniest part of a massive media empire conglomerate. So, but we get to play around. We're the ones that get to have fun. We're the ones that get to publish these works and fulfill that humanity's dreams of talking about our love of words and of books. But at the end of the day, you do have to be careful. Your emotional attachments to what allows us to do this has to be grounded in the reality of the business operation. So there's my you didn't ask for it take of why I think you should pay attention to the people who are about to talk. So we have Ashley Runyon first to cover the acquisitions process. She's the director of the University Press of Kentucky in Lexington. After working in various positions in design, marketing, and production at the Lexington Herald Leader and Blood Horse Publications, she returned to UK 2008 as a marketing manager, then senior acquisitions editor, while also coordinating fundraising development. She's most recently directed the trade list for Indiana University Press and Red Lightning Books before accepting the director position at the University Press of Kentucky earlier this year. She specializes in general interest titles and building promotional platforms with potential authors. Next, you'll hear from Rachel Rosolina in the editorial design and production phase. Rachel Rosolina is a Tennessean who has found herself rooted in Southern Indiana, a graduate of Berea College and West Virginia University. She currently works in the publishing industry as a marketing and publicity manager. Then you have Stephanie Williams, who is going to cover the marketing portion. She's the director of Wayne State University Press in Detroit. Her university has been in sales and marketing management with positions at the University Press of Florida, the University of Missouri Press, the University Press of Kentucky, and director at Ohio University Press. Then you will hear from Jennifer Kelly about the author platform and experience once the book's all done, ready to go. Jennifer is a lifelong horse racing fan, using her experience as riding instructor and technical writer to chronicle and preserve the history of her favorite sport, especially the Triple Crown. Sir Barton and the Making of the Triple Crown is her first book, and her second book, The Foxes of Belair, Gallant Fox, Omaha, and the Quest for the Triple Crown, is going to be under contract and will be published with the University Press of Kentucky. So please join me in welcoming these other folks, starting with Ashley.
Hi, thanks so much for having us tonight. So I'm Ashley Runyon. I'm the new director at the University Press of Kentucky. I had started first in marketing at UPK, and then I moved to acquisitions in 2011. So I just came back as the director in March. I made it a whopping 3 days before we went remote. So it's been quite a start, to say the least. But, I'm a Kentuckian. I've lived here my whole life. I love it. I'm so excited to be working with a list so close to my heart. So with that, I think starting in marketing and then moving to acquisitions, I really like to think about the process from the beginning to end. And I'd like to recommend for authors to think about that as well. So I'm going to talk about, let's think about that you're putting together a proposal and you're wanting to pitch someone. So for me, we're doing 50 to 60 books a year, but we get hundreds of proposals throughout the year. And some of these proposals are really fantastic, and I'll kind of talk about what I look for in a great proposal. But then a lot of times I get an email and it'll say, hey, do you want a book on this? And it'll be, literally 2 sentences. And any sort of book could be good. We do a lot of bourbon books. So, you could say, hey, I want to write a bourbon cocktail book. Well, that's great. What do you know about bourbon cocktails? And do you have the right platform to do that? So when I'm working with authors, I try to make them think of, who are you? What do you want to do? And are we the right press for that? So when we're going into a project and when we're doing a book, we're going to be spending years of our time working on it. We have, a great staff that puts a lot of time and effort into it. Your typical book is going to cost you about $25,000. And that doesn't include any overhead. That can be kind of direct expenses for trying to get a book out. Why should we spend our time and money with you? It's really a partnership. And so thinking about that and going back to a proposal, once you kind of looked at other presses, whatever you're working on, is this press publishing in that area? You know, I get a lot of really great proposals for projects that don't fit into our main areas. So in Kentucky, you know, we obviously focus on Kentucky and Appalachian studies, but we have wonderful lists in film biographies. We also do a lot of military history and a lot of civil rights. So, you know, if you're not fitting into those main categories that we do, and a few subcategories, we're not going to be able to take you on, you know, even if that's something that might not be a good fit for us. So in the proposal, I think, you know, the basics, you know, who, what, when, where, how, who are you? You know, I think as much as what the project is that you're working on, who are you and who can you bring to it? So do you have a strong social media platform? Do you know folks in the media for this? How are you going to be able to speak to this topic in a really compelling way? And I think when we get to Jennifer, I think this is going to be a great representative for her as well. I have a lot of people and they come in and you ask them, who's the market for this book? And they're like, well, everybody. But you know, if everybody is the market for your book, then nobody's the market for your book. So, you know, knowing who you are, what your book is, and who you're marketing to. When I talk with an author who understands that and knows like who's going to be interested in their book, that perks me up, you know, immediately. That's definitely going to help you kind of go farther along in the process. So, you know, going back to the who, what, when, where, why, you know, what is your book? You know, thinking about the table of contents, how's it going to be laid out? The subject for a book is really easy to come up with. Laying it out and seeing how it's going to come together is very important as well. You know, why is it important? You know, really just kind of thinking about making in a thumbnail what's going to be really good for the editor that you're pitching to. We get a lot of manuscripts, and you know, if you get hundreds of manuscripts a year, it's impossible to read them all. So, you know, even if you do have a finished book, having a very polished and customized, I think, proposal is really great. I want to hear what you want to do with us at Kentucky, and that's going to really help us to come out there and really help you a lot more when you're working on your project. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the next stage. Let's pretend that, you know, you sent a great proposal, you sent a great manuscript, we love the book, you're under contract at that point too. And so what does that look like? How do you get there? And you'll see a lot of people here that are associated with university presses. That does mean that we do some academic books, we do some scholarly titles that are really geared towards professors, towards course adoption, to a very small market. But you will be seeing, you know, particularly with university presses, but small presses as well, there's a lot of what we call trade books. So that's a general interest title that we want to get in that bookstore. We want Davis to be able to carry it at Union Ave and be able to have events with you there. And so when we're talking about the review process, that can vary widely depending on where you are. But the one thing that I would encourage any potential author is embrace the review process. Don't think of it as just some hoop that you have to jump through. Think of it as making your book better. I think when we're trying to send it out there to folks, we call it a peer review. And I really mean that by a peer review. So if it's a scholarly book, it's going to go to scholarly readers. Going back to the bourbon cocktails, I'm not going to send our bourbon cocktails book to academic professors for reviewers. So we're going to be sending it to food writers or maybe some newspaper authors or people who know the area. So really take that feedback and kind of embrace that. And I think that's going to be true of no matter what press you go to, whether it's a university press or whether you're working with a smaller publisher and working directly with an editor. It is never a finished product, you know, until you have it in your hands, really engaging with the people that you're working with at the press and knowing that they have your best interest and the best interest of the book at heart. You know, it's never something that, I'm not saying this to be mean, I'm saying it because I'd rather us talk about any issues that come up now versus than when the book is published and we don't have them available for that point. And, you know, the biggest thing in acquisitions is really trying to think about how you can be a great author and a great partner for us throughout the entire process. So, you know, it doesn't just stop when you get a contract here. It's really thinking about working with our marketing team, working with the copy editor to be a great editor, to be a great author, and think about the entire process and just knowing that you're a partner in it too. We can't do everything on our end. You can't do everything on your end, but together we can do a really great book. So I think with that, we'll wait to have some questions later, and then I'll give it on to Rachel to kind of talk about the next stage, once you have the contract, which is editorial design and production.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Rachel Rosolina, and I'm currently a marketing and publicity manager at Indiana University Press and our trade imprint, which is Red Lightning Books. Prior to that, however, I worked in editorial design and production at several presses over the past 15 years, including Berea College's literary journal, now known as Appalachian Review, West Virginia University Press, an educational publisher called Solution Tree, IU Press, and my own editorial company, Inkblot Editing. So I'll just begin at the beginning, and hope some of you might know this stuff, and hopefully it's new to some of you. So editorial design and production, which is often known as EDP, is where the rubber meets the road. This is the exciting time when your manuscript is edited, designed, and actually becomes a book. So once acquisitions, as Ashley mentioned, has finished ensuring that all the parts are there and that the contract is signed, the files come to EDP. And one misconception that new authors have is that when they turn in their final draft to acquisitions, they think they're done until they see the final book. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Your project will be with the EDP team for upward of a year as they copy edit your manuscript, lay it out into page proof so it looks like a book. They file for the Library of Congress CIP data, or the cataloging and publication data, the block that goes on the copyright page. They finalize the index, they edit the front and back cover, and they proof all of those little pieces before the book goes to the printer. So having worked at several presses, the process always differs a little bit, but the bones are the same. At IU Press, a project manager is assigned to each book once it goes into EDP. This person will guide the book through all the production stages and will be the author's contact. So there, if they've got any questions or concerns or need to change their schedule, and essentially this person is your cheerleader during this process. Generally, the author will see the project after 2 specific stages: copy editing and then page layout. That first review will give you the chance to review the copy edits in a Word doc. The copy editor will have used track changes to edit according to the press's house style and the Chicago Manual of Style, which is our editorial Bible. The author's job at this stage is to do any necessary rewriting and also to answer any questions that your copy editor might have had as they read. So your second and often final review is of the page proofs. This will come in the form of a PDF and will look like the interior of the book. So it's got running heads at the top, page numbers, a chapter title design, and so on. And this stage offers you one last chance to make sure there are no glaring errors. For instance, that the correct art is with the correct caption, that your name is spelled correctly, or that your new job title made it into your bio. At the presses I've worked at, once that book is laid out in pages, any edit has the potential to cause that text to reflow across page breaks. So reflow will affect the index and will also potentially introduce errors. So best practice is to make as few edits as possible once you get to page proofs. Instead, do all of that careful copy editing at the earlier review stage. So I wanted to share some quick tips and tricks that I've learned. The first is keep your chapter titles short. They have to fit in that running head at the top of the page. So keep that in mind. Another is don't bother to make your Word document look fancy. The press will do that for you later. Instead, be careful to just follow the press's guidelines, which are generally Times New Roman 12-point font, pretty basic. If you don't know how to use track changes in Word, talk to your project manager or your contact at the press. Please don't try to fake it. I actually ran across this today editing. Someone just tried to highlight text in a different color and underline it. And that's not track changes, and that actually can cause problems in the editorial process. Know that when your copy editor is suggesting edits, they're doing so to make the book at the best it can be. They're not judging you, they're not judging your writing or your editing skills. They're literally just doing their job, and they're trying to help. So try to keep that in mind as you go through those suggestions. An important one, when suggesting cover images, please remember that it's not just about a pretty picture, and it's not about your nostalgia for your kids' art. It has to represent what the book is about at a glance. Also know that publishers often get feedback from sales reps saying to avoid certain color schemes or fonts. So know that the designers at your press are juggling multiple opinions on cover design to best serve your book. And that's the end goal, is what is going to make this book sell the best. And finally, when your project manager gives you a deadline, just do your best to stay on schedule. If for some reason you're going to miss that deadline, let them know as soon as possible so that they can work out a contingency plan. We all know that life happens, and if we can adjust things on our end to keep your pub date the same, we will. So, we're pretty easy going, flowing people. We just need to know ahead of time. So I look forward to answering your questions later, but now on to the great Stephanie for marketing.
Oh, thank you, Rachel. That was great. Thanks for having me here with you. I'm outside of your region now a little bit, but I'm really pleased to be here. So marketing, what is marketing? Marketing is basically the process for creating, communicating, and delivering things that have value to customers. In this case, books to readers. How do we let them know? How do we get people enthusiastic? How do we inform booksellers about your book, about a book? So marketing has a lot of interactions with every department at the press. I don't know about the big trade houses, but I know at university presses, there is a lot of interaction among everybody from everything around a single project. But marketing really is often involved from the very beginning. When you go to Ashley, for example, and say, here's the audience for my book. Marketing may look at the project, the proposal, and say, yeah, I think that's right. But also, what about this other audience for the book? I think we can get to all of those audiences. Sometimes they're involved in talking about titles. Sometimes they're involved in talking about cover design, because the marketing department really often feels responsible for having an eye on what's going on in the outside world. What are the trends in book selling? What are the hot books that are possibly related to your topic? But really, the kind of marriage that occurs with a marketing team, because unlike everybody else, once you get to marketing, you're with those people for the entire rest of the life of the book. You're not going to go back to acquisitions except for a different title. You're not going to go back to EDP. You're with marketing for the duration. So I think of it as a marriage. With all of the benefits and difficulties that come with marriages. Really, the first thing we in marketing start thinking seriously about is when we receive from you a beautifully complete marketing questionnaire. And if you want to see what a marketing questionnaire looks like, I believe Kentucky has theirs on their website, and you can look at it free of charge. It's a good thing to look at. I know that authors kind of dread having to fill those out because it requires soul searching. It requires giving us the names of your friends who might have a platform. It means talking to us honestly about what your platform is and who that includes. And so we like to get really rich information back so that we can begin to form the basis of our plans to take your platform and make it bigger, make it more focused on the topic of the book. We are also deeply involved at this point in metadata, which is the hidden information that really runs all of our online lives, whether it's an image, but especially when it's a book. So we start thinking about things like keywords and when do we need to get the metadata in the system for optimal transmission out into the world. We set the publication date based upon when the book is shipping. A little kind of insider thing about publication dates is they used to be set 6 to 8 weeks before the book was shipping to stores so that newspapers could take their advance copy and write their beautiful feature article that everyone would see. And then by the time that came out, they could go to their local bookstore and buy it. Well, I'm sure many of you are thinking right now that there are at least a couple pieces of this that don't happen anymore. So this tradition persists mostly now to allow time for books to make it through the distribution chain. So usually when we get the marketing questionnaire, we have a conversation with the author, we talk internally, we develop a plan. From there, often we create bound galleys or advanced review copies that go out to booksellers, event venues, and media. We follow up on those. We try to get commitments from media for review coverage. And then we start talking to kind of the secondary list. We pitch to podcasts and bloggers and all sorts of journalists who might have something to say about the book. And then finally, the book is available just when the author is feeling like they have been working on this forever, and that by now, surely everyone knows about this book because they've been working on it for 10 years. It's familiar. This is the point where there's often a pep talk from the marketing department that says, I know you've been at it for a long time. We are just at the beginning of the process. And then if everything goes optimally, we send you out into the world with a rich schedule of events and speaking engagements, and you're well prepared for those. On the other side, we've been talking to booksellers. We've been saying to booksellers, I know you have customers who bought a lot of copies of this book. Well, our book that's coming out now is similar in these ways or dissimilar in these ways. I think you really need to stock it and stock it heavily, stack it up on the table, hand sell it. I came from a book selling background, and the most important tip I ever learned about book selling, which really doesn't apply right at this moment, was to, when you're talking to a customer about the book, to put it in their hand. It's harder to put the book down once it's in your hand than it is to just take it to the register and pay for it. But that's also where all of the pieces kind of come together. So somebody has this physical object that's been cared for years by EDP that is based on the ideas that were discussed with acquisitions. And then somehow through the marketing process, this bookseller has learned what to say to you as a customer to get you to buy it. And I think that's where I look forward to hearing to your questions later, but I think I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer.
Oh, thank you, Stephanie. I'm so excited to see everyone tonight. Thank you so much for letting me be a part of this panel. And I really hope I do justice to the author side of things. Everyone so far, Ashley and Rachel and Stephanie, have presented some really great insights, and Davis into all the aspects of the business side of writing a book, and I'm going to talk about the actual book side of it. I have a background in technical writing, and I taught writing as a instructor at a college level for over 10 years. And so I've seen writing in all its phases. And, you know, what we're talking about begins with the author and really ends with the author. But in between, there are all these other team players. And so you as an author have to really embrace the fact that all these people are here on your side to help you with this, because I learned very early on that I knew a whole lot about what I was writing about, and I didn't know jack squat about the process of actually getting the darn book ready to go. So it's very humbling, but you as a writer know your audience best. You have the insight that your marketing and your acquisition editor need. Now, all of us start with this grand idea, I'm going to write a book. And you tell yourself, you might tell your friends, tell your spouse, whoever, I'm going to write a book, and you have a great idea, and totally you should embrace that idea. But while you're doing it, while you're being creative, think about yourself from the business side of it too. And the earlier you can get into this part of the process, the better off you will be. I actually wrote a series of blog posts about this because I didn't learn this part of it until I was about halfway through writing my book. So I literally had to stop writing my book, start on this part of the process, and then go back to writing my book. So the earlier you can, while you're generating the idea for your book, think about who you're writing it for. And I know you want to say, well, everyone will be interested in it. Y'all, I'm glad that's your ambition. But let me say, as someone who writes for a very niche market, you got to be realistic about who's going to pick your book up. Okay. I write about horse racing. There are certain pockets of the country where that's going to be more appealing than others. I had to be realistic about that. I had to have that knowledge in hand. I know that there are going to be certain age groups that might be more interested. And I needed to have all that information down, not only so I could write the book and have it be appealing to those people, but also so that when I did fill out the marketing questionnaire for Stephanie and Company, that I was able to communicate that information to them so that they could take that information and use it to advocate for me, because that's what they're there for. Ashley and Rachel and every single person are advocating for you as an author because they want you to succeed, because then they succeed as well. All right. So as you're thinking about your writing and what you're going to do, think about who you're writing it for. And, you know, really as you're working, narrow that down more and more, because you're going to be the best person to speak to that. You know, the marketing people will do their part of it, but you're the best person to speak to all that. Also, once you finish writing, and even while you're in the process of writing, the editorial part where you actually have to work with people on feedback about your writing, whether you're in peer review or you're working with the editorial layout people, understand that I think some writers get really, it gets personal, and they feel like any sort of feedback they get might not necessarily be about the book, but might be more about them personally. And I had to work with my students on this a lot. When you get feedback about your work, it's feedback in the effort to make this ready as a product to sell. It's not that your book is not a good idea or not that your writing is not up to snuff. It's just we're getting this ready to make this the best it can be for the marketing people, the layout people, everybody. So, I mean, I've been through the whole gamut of, you don't just write the book and then turn it over and you wash your hands of it until it's a finished product in your hands. Oh, no. Turned my book in March and had it back in the summer to do copy edits, and then got it back again to do proofs, and then got it back again to do the index. And I think my book came out in March, and the last time I looked at it was Christmas. So, I mean, you're going to be in it for the long haul. So think about these things as you're writing. Like, have a plan, have deadlines for yourself, have you know, anything you can do to make it easier on you so that when you do turn this over to, you know, your layout person, your acquisition editor, whoever, that you're prepared and you can answer those questions on the spot and you can represent yourself the best way you possibly can, so that when other people are advocating for you, they know exactly how to do that. So I hope that that's covered all of it for the author side. There's nothing better though than getting the actual book in hand and then like sharing it to people. So let me tell you, while I had spent many days in my office alone going, it really was worth all of the struggle and the questioning and, you know, the tears it took to fill out the marketing questionnaire. And to do the book proposal and any other thing that I needed to do. Once I did it, it was so worth it, because once I had the writing done, I knew I had covered all my bases. I wasn't just done writing.
You did a beautiful marketing questionnaire too. I can vouch for that.
I've been thinking about it for a really long time. And like, I knew, because I was writing in such a niche, and I'm speaking from a nonfiction perspective. Fiction is also similar in some ways, because I didn't have to have my book finished before I had to do certain parts of the process. Like I had a contract and then I had a finished book. And with fiction, you have to have a finished manuscript and then you get a contract. But I spent a lot of time with my book. We like collaborated a lot. We talked, we you know, exchanged glasses of wine and had like lots of tearful moments about each other. But it was like, I needed to really commune with it as something separate from me, so that when things, like when you inevitably get feedback that you're not 100% about, you're like, okay, well, you know, that's fixable. Like I could do something with that. So thanks. Yeah, I hope I covered my end of the story.
If I could just put one other thing in, Jennifer does social media fantastically. And like, I do not follow her, you know, on Twitter, and so, you know, she really just understands what people want, and I think that she's just a great model for. I often use you as an example. If we like do like. So.
Yeah, I forgot to talk about that part of it too. I know a lot of writers that are very social media, like, you know, like, because social media can be a really just arduous place to be, especially right now with all the things going on. But the earlier you can delineate and differentiate yourself from the people around you in terms of establishing yourself as an expert, whether it's in, you know, a field like mine, or whether you're, you know, whatever genre you're working in, the earlier you can find a way to get people's attention and show people what you can do, the better off you will be. And social media is the place to do that. And Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and even TikTok and other places now can just seem like it's such a vapid place. It's really not. If you do it right, you can connect with people in a meaningful way. And I've been able to do that very luckily, to the point that I felt like when I actually did have the book finished, I was able to market it much more efficiently than I would have been able to if I'd been starting when I finished the book. So I started really annoying people mercilessly before I even had the book. And it was nice, because then once I was doing the marketing phase, when I was doing the book tour, I had people's attention already. Like, they knew the book was coming, and I was able to do things that I wouldn't have been able to do otherwise, which I have so many stories about. So social media, I know it's annoying, but it's a thing and you need to do it.
I can vouch for that as I go into my section, which is that any sort of personality that I can see before I've seen the author, before they come to do an event with me, or before I tell someone else about, I can tell someone about the person. So it's not just like you posting your content or your expertise, it's you being a person that I know. And if I know you, then I can sell your book because I know your book. And so that's just a tag in onto that, social media verse. So I get to overlap a bit with what Stephanie and Jennifer was talked about, and go back to that phase of marketing, because when that metadata and when that marketing to me comes, there's kind of this clock that starts ticking, right, about how much effort is put into promoting the book as to how much information I as a bookseller can receive. Because you have to understand that there is a shoot happening in which all these books are being thrown into roughly about 6 months out from their pub date, all right? And that chute is along with the big five and all the trade houses, and they're throwing us about 300 titles a catalog. And then you have all of these other smaller presses that may have 5 to 10 a catalog. And what I would put the university press, because we don't sell academic titles. You have to think about, you know, independent bookstores. The independent bookstore market is a very specific market, all right? There's online markets. You can get online sales from Russia all day if you want. You can get online sales from the big box stores, from Barnes and Nobles, and et cetera. That's fine. But the independent bookstore market is a particular market. We have a curation, we have a trust, and we have a relationship with customers and authors and publishers. We're the favored child. I'm just going to say that. At least that's how it seems to be. So when I view university presses, I see them, they're not comprising the majority of the books on our shelves, but they are a very small, specific, a curated set that I think does really well within an indie bookstore market because they are traditionally published, because they have the backing of the sort of academic wherewithal. So I'm going to speak to that chute, but just know that these expectations may not be your expectations as a writer, as you know, depending on how the publisher takes care of it. So when we first see your book, we see the catalogs, we see these advanced readers, we see those galleys. There's an entire bookcase back there of galleys. That's like the best part about becoming a bookseller, is you get all these advanced copies. But again, we're seeing thousands and thousands of titles, so something has to come out. We get review requests. We'll get some people that know us, that there are sales reps that know us, or publicists that know us, and say, hey, I know that you've read this, I know that you hosted this event, will you submit this for an Indie Next review, right? And so like a bookseller review goes out, those are like 2 months out in time that we have to, two to three or something, we have to get them in before they get submitted and so those are little ways that help the review. But to me, the ideal timeline is that I've heard about it 6 months out, so that I can like forget about the book and then remember. Because like the more I see the cover, the more I see the promotion, the more I see the buzz about the book. We're all about buzz as booksellers. So it's like, who's talking about it? Is everyone else talking about it? Why is everyone else talking about it? We feel that envy very strongly when we haven't heard about a book, when it's about to come out. And that's really what hooks us, because we are very subjective. We pick what we like and what we don't like, and we can put it on the shelf or we can not put it on the shelf. And so we're getting sent all these catalogs, we're getting pitched all these things, and we have to use our taste. And the publishers are actually really understanding of that, right? They know that every book on their list is not going to sell to Union Ave, right? And so they try to do their thing and match what we want, and we have to do that to publishers because we want their books, we want their authors coming. Let me see, I think I covered everything in that. Yeah. And also, I like to be introduced about a book from someone else. I understand I want to hear about your book and I want to get to know you, but there's this trust building process in which I need to hear about a book from like a repudiated platform or a trusted source before I'm just going to hear a cold email pitch from someone about stocking their book in our store. Because if it's done the wrong way and I'm in the wrong moment or I miss it, I'm not gonna treat it as caringly as I would if it's delivered in this neat box or a nice letter, a personalized note. There's all these ways to get my attention, and I know it's hard to get my attention. Like I said, I have to be aware of all these other books. But if you can get my attention far enough before the pub date, I'm gonna give it a boost. And so then the second process is the buying and ordering. And I am not the buyer, so I'm speaking to this as sort of an adjacent, but the buying is a very sacred process at the bookstore. If you've ever worked at a bookstore, whoever has the role of the buying, they go through the thousands and thousands of lists, all right? And they know what they're gonna sell 2 of and what we're gonna sell 6 of and what we're gonna sell 1 of and the ones that we're not gonna take a chance on. So they have all that responsibility of sorting through the catalogs. And I can kind of bug and say, hey, I wanna do an event for this, can you put this on? Or I can say, hey, I really like that book. It does become a sort of collective process. We do a lot of it based on previous sales numbers. We ask a lot of the, Chelsea will kind of ask me, oh, didn't you like that book? Didn't you read that previous book? So we check on previous authors. We take a lot of the advice from sales reps, anything that's on our radars. And then, like I said, thinking about potential future events. Something that you have to consider if you don't go through a traditional publisher, ordering viability. What's your distribution? Is it available in Ingram? Can we get it? If it is hard for us to get, if the pub date is not clear, if any information on that data is not clear, we're not going to order it because it's hard. We're lazy, right? Like you have to think of us as we get really excited about some things, but if you make it difficult at any step in the process, and I'm talking to authors and I'm talking to publishers as well, we're just less likely to work with you because we'll find another title to sell because we have tons to pick from, right? And so it is this weird sort of pitching process in which you are trying to be my friend. It feels like a weird power dynamic, but honestly, the more we go through it all, it's, you know, we understand the character of the store. I understand the character of our customers. I understand the nature of our events program, right? I want to put your book in the right place. And just like Jennifer is aware of what her market is, you should be aware. You don't want to force a book in our store if it doesn't belong in our store. And so yes, we have that judicious process, but it becomes, again, it's this synchronistic relationship. So, you know, we're willing to take a chance on certain books and not take a chance on other books, but it's that consistent coming to us and saying, will you try this out in the right way enough times that I may take a risk on a book if I've been presented books in the right way repeatedly. And that comes from authors and that comes from publishers as well. And then, you know, you can talk about events. Not every author gets to go on an event tour, right? Like there's not necessarily funding for that. You should count yourself lucky if you get to do an event tour. Now, that being said, that's what I do. That's what I love to do. I have this process where I make pitches to the bigger name publishers in order to get. So you have to think about the way that the ranking system is that I am the big five is what we're talking about. So there is the same catalogs that go to our buyer goes to me on an event program, and they'll tell what are the specs, why are they touring, what are they doing. And I'm trying to find the biggest names that should come to Knoxville. You know, I'm selling Knoxville as a city. And so I go through and I try to fill my calendar up for those first. I get approached by random New York publicists all the time, you know, with sort of a niche market book that they want to sell here. So I have to fill that up before I kind of go down the line, and I have to think about viability. Like, how many of these books are we going to sell? Is this worth taking a risk? Is it worth my labor to put on the marketing to set up the event? Does it fit with our schedule? Is the press, author, or book easy to work with? You know, I can only account for so much in making up for an event. And like, trust me, authors can be really difficult to work with. Sorry that I'm talking to a room of writers, but they can be very, and some of the more successful ones are difficult and you have to deal with it. But, you know, there's a lot that I am doing in addition to putting on your book. So if we're going to take you on your book for an author event, it means it's really special and it fits with what we're doing. So then you come to your pub date, all right? And there is displays in the store, and we have a new book table, and we have this process of rotating them through. We have staff picks. The marketing promotion that you're going to get at that point, different stores have different, you know, they have all these other sorts of approaches. But I'm really, by the time it's at pub date, if that isn't in place, if I don't know about it, you know, I may discover books that are sitting on our shelves that we ordered and then kind of boost it from there. But it's, I don't know, it's kind of run its course then. You know, if we have upcoming events, we're going to promote them as we discover things and are reading them and putting them on our staff picks list. The other thing you have to think about, you only have about plus or minus 3 months of sustained sales after pub date. So any of that marketing, any of that attention really needs to happen in those first few months. It could go longer for different reasons, but like by that time, 3 months, that's going, either it's going in the shelf or if we didn't sell any and we're returning that book, right? And so by that time, it's not face out, it's on the shelf, right? It's spine out. And so you need to maximize your face out time. And we're more likely to leave the book faced out the first few months of its publication. You know, thinking about how your book is set aside from all the other books, because again, you are going up against the big five all around you. Another thing that's kind of an odd thing, we don't need your help with the manipulation of the books in our store. I know that's like an interesting request that I'll get sometimes. It's like, oh, can you put this or make a feature? Can you do a display? Sometimes it works. Sometimes the press, you know, we have this Best American series. We've got they'll send us a whole display case, and that makes it easier for us. But I mean, like, we know what's best. We know where to put this. We know the store arrangement. Like, that's not something where you want to make enemies of us by trying to come in and move your book somewhere where it gets more attention. So anyway, just a weird note. And then the last thing, I'll just reiterate what I said earlier about relationships. Like, we will work harder than anything to sell your book if we really want to, if we have a personal connection, if we've heard about it from someone we trust, or if we know you. And that, like, at the end of the day, I mean, I think everyone in the publishing industry hand sells to each other. Every conference I go to, I'm always excited to hear what so-and-so is going to sell to me, like, and not even realize that I'm going to fall in love with the book. So that's sort of the just talk about books with people, like talk about books to us, right? That's what I love, because I need to keep knowing what's out there and what's happening. Not in a sort of pushy, edgy way, I just need to know what's going on. And like I said, but don't ask us to go too far, right? Like there is too far of an ask for what we do. You know, we treat all of the books like babies, and we give them as much equal attention as we can, you know, but like, we're temperamental. If you give us reason to be petty and not love your book, we will not love your book. And then lastly, just be a part of the bookstore community. Like, if you're truly active, all of these points are connected, right? Like, we connect to the publishers, we connect to the authors. If you are here, if you're in our store, if you're buying books from us, and I know that's sort of like an economic thing, but it's just, if you're around and we know you, that link is going to be easier to make. And no, I don't know the nitty gritty of all the publishing, and I can't give you the name of everyone who you should talk to, but it's just by virtue of association, and your name will be brought up in certain rooms if you are around and aware, or I may know when a publisher is looking for a specific type of book, and I'd be like, oh, well, I know that person who has been writing about this for years and never got hasn't gotten it published yet. And so it's this synchronicity that can happen pretty naturally. So, and I know I talked way too long, but we need to open it up for questions. So we'll see what's in the chat, or see if anyone has anything live.
So Davis, what I'm hearing is that I can't just submit the book, get $1 million advance and a movie deal, and forget about it.
I think that's right. Yep, that's pretty good.
That's just crushing. I mean, that's the dream.
I'm trying to go back through and see if there are any questions that were missed.
I have a kind of reformulation of a question that Jeanette and I were kind of having a little discussion about university presses and sales reps. And I'd be curious, Davis, to hear from you about how sales reps approach you with university press titles.
There are not a lot of them. That's I think they are spread thin. So I mean, it's really hard to talk about what is the right path to booksellers to be approached, because we have Penguin Random House, right? And their rep system has been the best forever because they can afford it and they can send people out. And so, you know, I have had some frank conversations with Ashley recently about university press catalogs and about sales reps. And, you know, we've got Bob Barnett does a lot of the repping, and he does a great job, but he also accounts for several university presses, right? And he gets paid by one of them, right? and so I think that I would love to see, and I mean, this is the same thing with small presses. I mean, you're talking about, I don't know what the teams at all of your presses are, but you're talking about a handful of people doing all the work and putting out a lot of these books. And so, yeah, I mean, we kind of have to want to discover them. I'm going to be honest. We want to have to seek out the titles. You know, I look for Appalachian focused university presses, right? And so like, I look at those catalogs and I see if there's anything that I want to do. I will say there are 2 university presses books that are on the National Book Award shortlist this year. So it's not that those things don't get through. It's just that I'm probably only going to be able to, here's a sort of honest take. I'm probably only going to be able to take 1 to 2 titles from a university press and really give them their full service in a season, right? You know, because I'm thinking about how many trade press that you can offer. And so a sales rep, if a sales rep is just coming to me to sell 1 to 2 titles, you know, that's hard. I've gotten emails from some of you all, and that has worked respectively. Rachel sent me emails about certain books, and we've had an honest conversation about, are we carrying it? Why are we carrying it? Why are we not? Do we want to do an event for it? And someone mentioned something about Annette's book, but Annette's is a good example. of, yeah, fiction writer presence, social media presence, the rollout, all of the marketing. And that's been a product of Ashley at UPK and just a lot of other things. If it's a good fit, if it's a really good fit, if the marketing questionnaire is full, as we're talking about, then it's easy for me. It's just, it just needs to be really easy for me. And it's you're fighting an uphill battle as a university press trying to get into indie bookstores.
Yeah, I can say that many of us have as many sales reps as we do staff, except those sales reps are also representing everyone else in the room, basically.
Yeah, at Kentucky, we handle Kentucky in-house, and so we really get to customize those pitches, and I think those relationships are really strong where we can go out and do that. But I think Davis is a great example. You know, Knoxville is not that far from Lexington, but it's another state, and that is with a sales rep who has a different contract for us. So, you know, at what point are you in violation of your contract with them too, or is it worth it for us to go out and do a pitch when we're going to have to pay them regardless of what happens? So it's complicated. But, you know, trying to make as many relationships as you can. And so, you know, we try to foster as much as we can in the state to kind of, you know, do the best with our area and the contacts that we have. But unfortunately, you know, we have a great film list. I don't know all of the film bookstores that are out in California. We have no, you know, direct relationships with them, but I wish that we could, but unfortunately, you know, we just don't have the staff or the resources to do that.
Well, here's where authors can be helpful, I think, if I can speak to what you guys are talking about, because I live in Alabama and I write about horse racing. And so most people in Alabama give me the bless your heart look whenever I talk about what I do. But if I know there's a bookstore near me, an independent bookstore or otherwise, that might be interested in carrying the book because they know me or they happen to be fans of the sport, or if I'm in like an area where I know that there are people who are, you know, there's like a racetrack nearby or whatever, I can go to my marketing people. I can say, hey, why don't you all think about pitching these people? I mean, we can do an event, and if we're going to do an event, they'll probably carry the book, and then da 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 da. So if you're an author, you know, think about, you know, helping out with that sort of thing. Like if you're not sure if whatever bookstore you're thinking of is on your press's radar, then you can at least bring it to everyone's attention. And then you can, again, as the author, aid in your own marketing, but you're also, you know, using that relationship that you've built both in their marketing department and with the bookstore. I mean, I've done that. I did a couple of events in Birmingham, which, you know, Stephanie and Ashley and the people who are in Kentucky would not have known that those bookstores were there, but I did because that's where I grew up. So I was able to make those connections. So if you're an author, you know, feel free to, you know, work with your publisher to say, you know, is this territory being covered? And if not, can I make a suggestion about, you know, possibly contacting these people about, you know, an event or a book or whatever.
I want to say too, like, don't wait until your book is published to go meet your local bookseller. I think Davis said something along those lines earlier, but I can't emphasize enough, you know, this idea of being a good literary citizen. That starts now. That starts 2 years ago. that starts with maybe redirecting, you know, some funds in the direction of these independents who are clawing their way into survival, just like some of us.
And that's a good point, because I can think of 2 authors right now. Yes, they are from bigger presses with better distribution and maybe have a bit more resources, but someone gave them a checklist and said, go introduce yourself to the booksellers 6 months before your book comes out. And the person I'm thinking of, she's a new author. She's never done this before. She was like, I was told to do this. And she was so cute and quiet. She bought a book. But like, I remember that now, right? You know, and, you know, she's like, I'm new to this. I don't know what I'm doing. They told me I should come say hey. So I came to say hey. And it's like, okay, cool. You know, and I mean, some of what we're talking about, I know the local, you know, I see a lot of you all the time, local writers. So there's kind of a different sort of mode of like interaction and coming in and And so it's not, so this might be more for the store that's a little bit outside of your radar. You know, like going to Chattanooga or going to Nashville or something, you know, and it won't be as quaint and as easy to just grab someone's attention or grab the right person's attention. But there are ways to introduce yourselves to us that are in advance and that give us time to process who you are. And then the other thing I was going to chime in is that not all university presses are created equally. So like some of what we're talking about, the like representation and attention, I can tell you that everyone here tonight, they do go the extra mile. They do give the attention to the authors that they put out there. But you need to know if the university press you are publishing with has a sort of trade-oriented sales department and like wants to get your book in independent bookstores, because if they don't want to get your book in independent bookstores, it's not going to go here. And so this notion of the tour and the like that relationship building, if it isn't built up into the presses program, then you kind of have to do all that on your own, right? And that is fine. You can do it. You just have a lot more work to do if you're going to do that, or if you choose to hire some private publicity or support like that. So.
Well, this is all making a great deal of sense to me, because personally, I've been kissing Davis's ass for years, and we had a perfectly marvelous discussion earlier this week, actually, and Davis enlightened me. I'd always thought of university presses as publishing textbooks, or if they did fiction, literary fiction. And then he told me that they have these things called trade divisions, which is actually what he deals with. So my question is actually, what is the role of a trade division at a university press? Why does the press do this, and what sort of titles are they looking for?
I'll take that one. So when you're thinking about the purpose of a university press, there's obviously that mission component of it. So a lot of university presses, they're getting state funds, that's coming from your taxes, usually a very small amount, but that is going traditionally to more regional publishing. That's not always the case, but thinking about things that are very historical to whatever your focus is going to be on. So for Kentucky, that's Appalachia. For the Indiana, that could be the Midwest, but there's also different areas that we're really well known for. So Indiana has a great music list. Kentucky, we have civil rights. So there's a lot of different things that we can do that have very small print runs. And I think that that's going to lead into why we do the trade books. So when you're talking about a very scholarly book, it's not unreasonable for that book to sell 150 copies, 200 copies, and that's kind of all that you're thinking about. And so the trade division is really to kind of balance that. And so I think you could talk about it being the money part of it, but I think it is a broader look at that as well. So for me, I think about what are things that we can do that are very central to the mission of what we're doing. So in Kentucky, we do bourbon, we do basketball, we do horses and history. Yes, those things are trade. Those are things that are going to be in an independent bookseller, but they're so crucial to what we consider ourselves as Kentuckians and what we're interested in. So I think each university press is different, but when it comes to the end of the day, it's all about sustainability and thinking about what are these books that we can put on our list to ensure that we're still viable 50 years down the road. And, we want to contribute to the culture and the history and the heritage of our region or whatever areas that we're specializing in. But the hard truth is that's not a viable business model anymore. So unless you have someone else coming in and saying, hey, I want to pay you to publish these really, well-written, well-researched, highly academic titles, you have to think about, making a little bit of money to make that sustainable as well. I always say that we're losing money strategically. We're never making money. We're a nonprofit. We get money and we get some funding, but you try to balance that the best you can. So our model is half trade, half scholarly. And I think that is getting to be a more common model, and it's just going to be a little bit different as whatever press you're at and what their funding looks like and what list they operate with.
And
so what I'm hearing then is that your trade division is basically looking for something that will sell, but that's also consistent with your overall mission.
Absolutely. And, just because it's a book that can sell it still goes through the same rigor and the same review process. It may go to very different readers, and they may be writers or buffs in that area versus professors or academics, but there's still a very thorough review process. So I had heard this one time as an acquisitions editor, is that a little bit about a lot of things. But let's take Jennifer's book for example. I can read it and say, hey, this is a really fascinating story about Sir Barton, but I don't know jack about horses and history. So I need to send it to somebody who understands that area. So I can look at it and say, hey, this looks really good from a publisher standpoint, but I want two people who really know that area to read it and make sure that everything looks good in that from that subject area.
And I was just going to add that I am making a prediction here that I think there's a movement away from Big Five. So if everyone is trying to get Big Five, and there's a certain flavor, there's a touch, there's sort of a disconnect, there's like a coldness. They make bestsellers out of their ability to pay for things. So we as booksellers are looking at that mid-range books. We're also looking for emerging writers, right? And you have to think about presses that are able to take risk on emerging writers and get them to that next level so that they can get a higher press trade. And so the thing about a university press is that it's both low barrier to access. You can see all these people, you can send them emails, you can send in acquisitions. And two, it has the reputation of and history of selling books, just knowing how to produce books, well-produced books. And with this new trend, like I said, I'm interested. I am excited to see what university presses are coming out with. I have my ranking of the ones that I like and the ones that I don't, but I mean, it's just like small presses, right? That's sort of this new model, is you have the Milkweeds and the Tin Houses that are kind of up there, Hub City Press. You have these presses that do a lot of work and get the distribution, but they don't, they're not known just right off of the name, right? But those are the people, in my mind, doing the work in the literary community. They're the ones that are going to be with you the long haul. And yeah, so I don't know, some of the conversation that Stuart and I had the other day is how that is getting published with the university press is an entry into the market in ways that you probably haven't thought of before. So.
And I'd like to talk about this from the author perspective too. If you have a project you're working on, but you're not 100% sure which direction to go in terms of who you want to publish with or who you want to work with, look at what people in your genre are doing and then gravitate toward that. So when I was working on my project, initially Sir Barton, before we found a home, I was looking around at what other books in my genre, who had published them and who had repped them, and trying to figure out how to reach out to those people. And it was as I was looking around for a home that UPK was brought to my attention, and I had not been aware prior to that the university press would be interested in a project like mine, to be quite honest, because I spent 12 years in a classroom, and I think university press, they publish textbooks, and then lo and behold find out that there's this whole trade division. And as I looked around, I discovered that other writers had started gravitating in that direction toward using a press like University Press of Kentucky. So if you're writing in a very specific genre and you're aware of other titles in your genre, go to the bookstore and look at who published them and start doing research on those publishers, because those are likely going to be your target anyway. So if you're, writing a book of poetry, you're going to find that there are going to be a list of publishers that are already known for that, and you should gravitate in that direction. And then maybe if those publishers don't work out, there's some emerging ones that you can get in with and work with them that way. And so, a lot of, when you're writing, it's not just about writing. It's also about understanding the business side of what you're doing. And I think writers, when you're just starting out, don't always see it that way. But the earlier you can get into that mode, the better, because then you can save yourself a lot of grief on the other end to find a publisher that fits you earlier.
I know we've gone over the time, Cindy. I don't know.
Yeah, I think maybe we say thank you now. This
Sounds
was
good.
a wonderful presentation. Thank you all so much. A lot of enthusiasm and knowledge.
I'd like to encourage anyone that has any questions further for like the author side of this to reach out to me on social media, and I'm always happy to answer questions about doing it from this point of view. So if you're in the process of doing something or considering doing something, even if you're not even in my genre or anywhere near it, just feel free to reach out for a fellow author's experience at the whole process.
Okay.
And thanks to Davis for setting this up.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Davis, and thanks to everybody.
Thanks everyone for giving us a distraction this evening.
Indeed. That's right. I forgot.
Let's go back to the third election night in a row.
Yeah.
Time to go hit that refresh button.
Yeah.
I would say the same thing as Jennifer said, reach out to us. I can put you in contact with anyone here. I know that I'm kind of the local person. So yeah, I want people to know everything they need to know about publishing before they ever write a book.
Yeah.
So it helps me on my back end. It really does. I love seeing people go through that process and make it there. So thank you all for listening.
Okay. Good night. Good night.
Thanks. Good night.
Thank you.